All right, welcome here to episode 5 of Operation Save Digby. Last week we left you with a little bit of a cliffhanger on our pre-chamber. So, Dad, why did this happen?
You know, we looked at the comments, and everybody wants to know why it happened. And a lot of people think, well, gee, you know, this could have been caused by this or that. Some people said, well, maybe it was the biodiesel the person was running. But I want to talk about why I think it happened. Now, I can't prove it, but this is my suspicion. First off, let's take a look at a new pre-chamber. This is a very rugged part. It's very thick metal. It's probably about 1/8 of an inch thick, and this is hardened steel. So first off, damage like this is not going to happen by something hitting it. Besides, take a close look here. You can see that it's like it's shattered, almost like a piece of glass, just shattered, and it's shattered between all those little holes that you saw me explain in that previous episode. So how did that shatter? Well, when hardened steel goes through cycles of extreme heat and rapid cooling, this type of metal can crystallize, and I think that's what happened. I think this crystallized. It obviously did not happen. It didn't happen overnight. It probably happened over numerous cycles of excessive heat and cooling down, excessive heat and cooling down. And then all of a sudden it just shattered. It just exploded. And the ball went too. I have a hunch the ball probably broke off first inside here, rattled around, and that could have, caused it to help accelerate that shattering of the tip of this pre-chamber. So first off, this didn't happen right away. This happened over a very long time, maybe over the course of a couple owners, okay? So you're asking next, well, where could that excessive heat come from? All right, there's probably 3 things. Number one, the engine could have been overheated. It could have been run low on coolant, gotten excessively hot, and gotten the tip really hot to the point where it was almost glowing red, and then that started the decline of the tip over a long period of time. Secondly, and I've seen this before, but I've never seen it happen with the pre-chamber. I've seen other damage, and that's somebody accidentally putting gasoline in their diesel. You can't believe, Joel, how many times this has happened. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've had a couple friends do this.
We've seen a few of that.
Yeah, we've seen a few. People they pull up the pump, they're not thinking, they just shove the gas in there, and all of a sudden the engine starts back.
Let someone else borrow the car that doesn't know.
That's right. Now, you drove a diesel for many years, and you had to be really careful, didn't you? Mm-hmm. Always the green nozzle. You know, a diesel will run on part gas and part diesel. If you put all gas in there, it probably will quit, because it's just such a hot burn with gasoline in there. But I've known that you can run on half gas, half diesel, and it'll make noise, it'll clang and bang. So that could have happened, okay? But think about this. So far, we've only seen damage on number 3, okay? Now, we haven't looked at the other pre-chambers, but the other cylinders seem to be running fine, so I don't suspect we're going to see this. So if it only happened on number 3, that probably rules out the possibility of, engine overheating by coolant loss or gasoline or even starting fluid. You don't want to spray starting fluid in these engines. Mm-hmm. They can cause damage to the pistons and the pre-chambers too, but not this. I mean, we've had comments say, people I've never seen, even mechanics that have worked on these for years, how many heads have you taken apart for me? If you've seen even a damage...
I've probably looked at 200 of those this summer and haven't seen one that was even close.
That's right, not one that's even close. Maybe a slight enlargement of one of those holes. So what caused this? Okay, how could this injector get really hot and then really cold? Really hot and really cold. And I think this is the culprit right here, the fuel injector. Now, take a look at the tip of this fuel injector. See that funny color? Mm-hmm. It's kind of a bluish color. That's an indication that this fuel injector has been overheated. I'm not going to get into why the injector could overheat, but when you get a certain type of burn in the cylinder wall, whether it be a little bit excess fuel that could cause the exhaust gas temperature rise up, you will get excessive heat in the pre-chamber. So let's go back now and take a look at testing number 3 fuel injector. This fuel injector is totally shot. That's the first time I've seen one actually behave that way. That was really bad. That's quite a bit of rust. It's all rusty on the nozzle. So you got to see again how badly that fuel injector was misfiring. Well, it was kind of dripping and draining. It wasn't really spraying. Imagine that happening over a long period of time. So you remember I took this apart and I found rust in here. Some of this rust has gone away, but there's a lot of rust inside this fuel injector. And you might be thinking, well, what could cause rust? This isn't caused from diesel fuel, okay? Biodiesel, when it sits in fuel injectors and when it sits in an injection pump, can cause corrosion like this. And that is maybe why biodiesel played a part in this problem. It's not the full cause of the engine overheating, but it's not the full cause of why that pre-chamber overheated, but you can see that biodiesel could have been a reason why the injector failed over a long period of time. Once again, this probably happened over months of driving. So injectors are so important, and not only is the spray important, whether or not it seals. I want to talk to you about injector tip sealing. Let's see if I have a good example here. Yeah, this one, I hope we can see this with the camera. So look closely at that tip. Do you see what I'm seeing? What are you seeing there?
Some gouging?
Yeah, it's actually burnt away. It's concave the face. Remember, this is supposed to be totally flat. Now, what would cause that? Not foreign object damage.
Heat.
That's caused by heat. And it's caused by too much fuel burning in that location, which means the tip has been leaking. Okay. So you come in, stop the car, the tip leaks fuel, and that excessive fuel that puddles around the bottom of the fuel injector can cause this to burn away. If you see your injectors with this type of damage, you probably should replace them or overhaul them, because it means the tips have been leaking. So this is the problem with the pre-chamber. Going back here, what caused the crystallization of this metal and it to just shatter? Okay, let's go through, let's say 1 year of cycles, okay? You got that? 1 year. You've got an injector that's spraying excessively and it's just almost squirting into the cylinder. And the burn cycle is too hot. It's creating too much exhaust gas temperature, and the exhaust gas temperature is causing the tip of the pre-chamber to get too hot. Then when you come in and shut the engine off, the injector is leaking.
Huh.
You follow me?
Yep.
Drip, drip. So what do you think happens when that drip, drip, drip hits the backside of the tip of this pre-chamber? It creates that, if you're familiar with metal, you know, rapid heating of hardened steel plus rapid cooling over and over and over again. It creates a crystal structure in the metal itself.
Okay.
So eventually that just blew out, boom, almost like, once again, like a shattered piece of glass. Yeah. So the little pieces probably went all over in there, and the ball, who knows what happened to the ball. Maybe it got blown out to one of the valves, and this is a problem. Some of that stuff, like shrapnel, could have shot through the valves and gone into some of the other cylinders.
Yeah.
Got that?
Got it.
So we don't know. We don't know, but I believe that this bad fuel injector is the cause of this. Now let's talk about some other damage that could have been caused because of this problem.
So, Dad, what other damage could this have caused? We've looked at the pre-chamber. We're going to get the camera down in there. But
right, yeah.
Before we go ahead and take a look at the piston and everything, what are we hoping to find when we actually put that camera down in there?
Well, best case scenario, Joe, we just put a pre-chamber in there and a glow plug and everything's fine. But, you know, Murphy's Law, right? Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about other problems that we might have with Digby. First, I want to talk about the piston and the piston rings. Obviously, you could have excessive damage on top the piston here from that shrapnel banging around in there. So that's a concern that we've got. The other problem is you could have damaged the cylinder walls. Now, this is a normal piston. In fact, this is a really good piston out of a low mileage diesel. And look at these rings here. Look at how tight they are in the ring lands, how much spring they have. And one of the problems that you run into when you overheat an engine, a diesel engine, that can be coolant loss. It can be excessive fuel burn from the fuel injectors. You get too much exhaust gas temperature, and that could be turbo overboost too. What happens is these piston rings lose some of their spring, and you'll have a loss of compression. I'm worried that the piston rings in Digby are probably weak. I don't think they're stuck.
Yeah.
Because we've been able to get the compression up by driving it and putting some additives in the fuel. But this is what could happen with excessive heat. So I want to show you this piston, Joel. You've probably never seen anything quite this bad. This is one of the worst I've seen. I kept it because it's a really good example of what could happen when a diesel piston really overheats. Now, I think this might have been caused by coolant loss and excessive heat. It could have been caused by loss of oil. There's an oil squirter on a turbo diesel engine that sprays the bottom of the cylinder wall. Something could have happened to that. But this is caused by excessive heat. The piston expands, rubs against the cylinder wall, lack of oil, and the rings get totally stuck in there. I hope this isn't the issue with Digby.
Yeah.
You know, because there's no way we can do Italian tune-ups till the cows come home. This isn't gonna,
That's not going to solve that.
I'm going to have you do another Italian tune-up, but if we have this problem, it's not going to fix it. And once again, stuck piston rings can be caused by faulty fuel injectors if it's an overheat condition. If it's an overspray condition where the engine's not really firing and it's just soaking the cylinder wall, the piston rings can wear out. You follow me?
Yeah.
Because that fuel provides some lubrication. So that fuel, if injected into the cylinder wall, can be washing the oil away. You follow me on that one? It literally washes the oil away and causes the rings to wear. And then finally, you know what this is, right?
That is the turbo.
That is the turbo. I'm concerned that we might have turbocharger damage too. You have any guesses why that may be?
Well, it's very likely that whatever broke off could have possibly hit this turbine because of the way that the turbo is connected. That's part of the exhaust system that runs through. Yeah. So if we did end up with any metal chunks, if it dinged it, I don't know what would happen if we have damage to the turbine in the turbine.
Well, if we have damage here to the turbine wheel, it's just going to keep the turbocharger from operating at peak efficiency. It's not going to, hurt the engine, but it's definitely going to create a power loss. The turbo won't spin up as fast if these blades are all damaged. But I could bet you $50, okay, that if we take Digby's turbocharger off, we're going to see a bunch of dings in this turbine wheel, okay? Okay, Joel, follow along here. We're going to turn this camera on. And we're going to put the light right down in the cylinder. And right away you can see it go in there. Now I'm going to use these buttons here to kind of rotate and lighten the view here. So we're looking at the top of the piston here. And you can see right there, you can see that's the indentation for the valves on top of the piston. And you can see right on top of the piston we have a whole bunch of diesel fuel and oil. So we're going to try to clean that off here in a bit and see if there's any other damage underneath the oil. Now let's go around and look at the cylinder walls. We're going to have to bend this a little bit. I think I'll have to take it back out and put a little curve in it. Okay, look at that. Look at the cross-hatching on the cylinder wall. Can you believe that? Look at that. I'm going to brighten it up. And we're going to move this around. Look at that cross-hatching. That's amazing. You would think there would be all the scoring. That's like factory cross-hatching when they assemble the engine on the cylinder walls. So I've already looked around on all sides here, and the only thing we're seeing is that puddle of oil. Let's see if we can get this a little bit better. There we're going all around the edge of the piston, and you can see the edge of the piston. There is no damage. So I'm going to pull the camera out. We're going to get some swabs in there, and we're going to try to see if we can clean up that oil and fuel that's sitting on top of the piston and see if there's any damage there.
All right, Dad, success. We don't have a burned up piston.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it, does it? It's not perfect, but...
So before we get to putting this all back together, I want to cover one thing real quickly. What are some preventative tips for people to help with these type of issues?
It's kind of interesting that you would ask that question, because I've thought about this. You know, the fuel injector, in my humble opinion, is one of the most neglected items on these old engines. People, they watch all these videos and they do all this work and they start fixing up their diesel. And hey, as long as the engine's running good, yeah, why bother checking fuel injectors? Now, this is really interesting to know this. You can get a fuel injector that is spraying properly and you think it's fine, but it's leaking when it shuts off. So when test fuel injectors, you really want to test and see whether they're dripping while they're holding pressure. And I think even a lot of shops that work on these old diesels, you know, the independent mechanic here or there, they won't focus on injectors. A lot of them don't have the test equipment that can test these properly. So you can't tell by looking at it. Obviously, I showed you that one earlier. If you have a burnt tip, you might want to suspect a problem there that they're leaking. Okay. So, you know, we can test the rest of Digby's and you can look at them. Maybe I'll get you into the testing. You know, we'll use our tester there and we'll find out just how good these are. But I think that, you know, you have to pay attention to these, folks, okay? You have to pay attention to these. And people, I think part of the problem is that people hear that these Mercedes diesels go 1 million miles. I always see this in the Craigslist ad. Hey, this is a 300D. It'll go 1 million miles. And they hear this over and over again. And it's like, well, you don't have to do any maintenance on these. They go forever. Well, they might go forever, but when they fail, this is what happens. Because no maintenance has been done. Right. You'll have some sort of catastrophic failure. So I think that you need to pay attention to the injectors, which means maybe every 40,000 miles, they should be tested for spray pattern and leakage, which will require, a pop tester. And if you look at all these things that we sell on my website, these were all developed to help people take care of their fuel injectors, whether it be the right socket, the pre-chamber tool, the slide hammer, the valve adjusting wrenches. All these are related to this, preventing this type of problem. So I think that from my experiences, I see worn fuel injectors around 150,000 miles. I start seeing that. And I think with the modern fuel, I don't know if you're aware of this, but a number of years ago, they took the sulfur out of diesel fuel. For environmental reasons. What do you think that sulfur did in the fuel?
Well, it acts as a lubricant, doesn't it?
That's right. The sulfur was a lubricant. So suddenly you take sulfur out of the diesel fuel, and all these newer diesels have different types of injectors, but these old ones require lubricant. And because of the new fuel, these may only last 120,000 miles unless you're religiously putting in an additive, like this diesel fuel additive that we sell on our website. I really like this liquid moly product. And the other thing you want to be doing periodically, probably every year, is to run a diesel purge through your fuel injection system. That cleans out the pump, cleans out the fuel injectors. So once again, preventative maintenance is key. And I'll encourage all of you out there that have these old diesels, be sure and check out all these products on my website that could help you prevent this here from happening to your diesel. So, all right, Joel, you get to have some fun today.
Well, we're going to get number 3 back in, and we're going to go ahead and give Digby a test run before checking out all the other pre-chambers. So let's get to it. First thing I'm going to get back on the engine is our new air filter housing bracket. This is something we sell on our website. We modify and reinforce it with the steel here. So I'm going to get this put in. I already got my bolt down here started. So this one's a little tricky. So I'm using some tape and this really fun wobble head extension to get this third bolt on. Remember to get your top 2 bolts started before you tighten the third bolt all the way down. Otherwise, you won't be able to get them in or started. Okay, we're going to put back in the 2 bolts that connect the turbo oil feed line. We have 3 bolts. We have 1 that goes up here. Put the EGR on first, then put the clamp on to connive the 2. And part of our kit with our bracket is we have the locking nuts for the back side of the mounts. Okay, get our last 3 bolts in. Already wiped it out. Pull it back on. Yep. I'll put our new here in. Copper side?
Yeah.
Until it goes all the way in.
Yep. So you can hear
So
the
you
hammer
can see
go
that we got our notch. It's in nice and good.
Notch is lined up.
Notch is lined up. Make sure to do a mental checklist and go back through and think through everything you took apart or touched, and go back through and actually go and make sure that you have tightened and put everything back that you need to before starting up the car.
Well, you can see we just rolled Digby out of the shop. I hope you're crossing your fingers like I am. This is kind of like as suspenseful for me as it is probably for you. I've never seen a pre-chamber that bad before. So I'm going to ask Joel to fire it up. Cold. We haven't even bled any air out of the system, so let's see what happens.